The Honda Civic's hazard lights blinked in perfect rhythm as Ernesto Pena raised the hood, playing his part in a performance that had worked 12 times before. Steam from a carefully placed wet rag created the illusion of an overheated engine. His brother Luis waved apologetically at passing traffic. The picture of roadside distress. Just another mechanical failure on Interstate 8. 20 miles past the California border checkpoint. Everything was going exactly as planned until a blue Toyota Camry slowed down to help. The driver who stepped out wore civilian clothes, khakis and a polo shirt, the uniform of weekend relaxation. But something in his walk, the way his eyes swept the scene, made Ernesto's hands tighten on the prop wrench. This man had been trained to see what others missed. And what he was seeing now, despite their careful staging, was a smuggling operation in progress. Inside the trunk, separated by a false panel that looked factory installed, 3 people held their breath. Maria, the Salvadoran seamstress who'd paid everything for this chance. Carlos, barely 18, following dreams his parents had died trying to achieve. Ana, 7 months pregnant, risking her unborn child for a life beyond poverty. They'd been in that dark space for 2 hours, waiting for this fake breakdown that would allow a vehicle switch. The final step in their journey to Los Angeles. The plan had been elegant in its simplicity. Cross the border checkpoint legally. Ernesto and Luis were citizens, their papers immaculate. Drive exactly 18 miles past, to a stretch of highway with good visibility and regular traffic. Stage the breakdown. Wait for their contact in a larger vehicle to arrive for the rescue. Transfer the human cargo during the apparent repair assistance. Drive away in separate vehicles. Another successful operation for the network that had perfected this choreography. But the helpful stranger wasn't following the script. He introduced himself as Tom, mentioned he knew a bit about cars, offered to take a look. His manner was friendly, casual, but his eyes were recording everything. The 2 clean tools. The strategic positioning of the vehicle. The way Luis kept glancing at his phone, waiting for a message that would signal their real rescue. Ernesto played along, describing fictional engine troubles while Tom nodded knowingly. They popped the hood together, going through motions of diagnosis. But when Tom suggested calling AAA, when he pulled out his phone to help, Ernesto saw him pause at the screen, not calling roadside assistance. Taking a photo of their license plate, subtle but unmistakable. The performance continued for 10 more minutes. Tom wished them luck, mentioned a good mechanic in the next town, drove away with a wave. But both brothers knew their operation was blown. An off-duty Border Patrol agent. It had to be, given the practice observation, the subtle photography, had seen through their show. The only question was how quickly he'd report it, and whether they could complete the transfer before units arrived. Luis made the call to abort, speaking in code about needing different parts, pushing the rendezvous to the backup location. But their contact was already en route, would arrive any moment. They had to risk it. The 3 people in the trunk couldn't stay there much longer. Carbon monoxide, heat, the pregnant woman's condition, every minute increased danger. The contact vehicle appeared right on schedule, a minivan with ladder racks suggesting a construction crew heading home. The driver, Roberto, had done this dozens of times. The transfer should take less than 3 minutes. They'd done it in 2 minutes 40 seconds during practice runs. But as Roberto pulled behind them, as they began the choreographed dance of helpful strangers, they saw the helicopter. Border Patrol helicopters were common along this stretch, usually heading to other calls. But this one circled back, dropping altitude. Tom's report had been faster than expected, or perhaps he called while still watching from a distance. The eye in the sky now focused on their roadside theater, turning helpful assistance into obvious crime. Roberto saw it too, made the calculation in seconds. He couldn't flee, too suspicious. Couldn't complete the transfer, too visible. Instead, he performed his role perfectly, checking under their hood, shaking his head, driving away like any good Samaritan who couldn't help, leaving the brothers with 3 people in their trunk and incoming law enforcement. The ground units arrived within minutes, not racing with sirens, but approaching steadily, professionally. They knew what they'd find. The helicopter had thermal imaging, would have seen the heat signatures in the trunk. The brothers' only choice was how to minimize damage to themselves, to their cargo, to the network that would continue tomorrow with different players. Ernesto made the hardest decision of his life. He opened the trunk before the agents arrived, helped the three people out, told them to sit on the roadside barrier. No hiding, no running, no resistance. Maria emerged crying. Carlos looked dazed in the sudden sunlight. Ana held her belly, the baby kicking as if sensing freedom and capture simultaneously. The agents were professional, almost kind. They'd seen this scene hundreds of times. Handcuffs of the brothers, water bottles for the migrants. Everyone processed with efficient humanity. One agent mentioned they'd been tracking this highway switch operation for months. The fake breakdowns had become too regular, too perfect. Tom's observation had simply confirmed what they suspected. In a patrol vehicle, Ernesto watched them lead Ana to an ambulance, checking her condition with genuine concern. She'd be processed, detained, likely deported, but she and the baby would survive. Carlos would return to a country that had already killed his parents. Maria would go back to the poverty she'd spent everything to escape, all because a trained eye had seen through their performance. The story of the Pena brothers spread through smuggling networks as a cautionary tale. They'd been too successful, run the same plan too often, become predictable in their unpredictability. Ernesto got 5 years federal time, Luis 3. The network adapted, found new methods, new routes, new performers for the border theater. But the lesson remained. Even perfect plans could be undone by the wrong audience member. In prison, Ernesto replayed that moment endlessly. Tom stepping out of his Camry, friendly and helpful, seeing everything while appearing to see nothing. The way his eyes had lingered on the trunk, noting its slight sag from hidden weight. How he'd touched the hood and found it warm but not hot. Steam without overheating. Professional recognizing professional. Performance detected by trained observation. He learned later that Tom had been driving home from vacation, wasn't even working, hadn't been looking for smugglers. But 20 years of border enforcement had made observation automatic. He'd seen the signs without trying. The too convenient breakdown location, the nervous energy disguised as mechanical frustration, the way both brothers kept checking phones for timing rather than calling for help. Louis served his time in a different facility. The brothers separated by the system they'd tried to game. They'd started smuggling to pay for their mother's cancer treatment. Each successful run bringing medication she couldn't otherwise afford. The irony wasn't lost. Crossing borders to extend life, only to lose years of their own. Their mother died while they were inside, adding grief to guilt. The three people from the trunk faced their own consequences. Maria was deported within weeks, back to the violence she fled. Carlos disappeared into Mexico's shadows. Trying again with different smugglers, his fate unknown. Ana gave birth in detention. The baby an American citizen with a deported mother. Another family separated by geography and law. The highway switch method died after the brothers' arrest. Too exposed, too risky once authorities knew the pattern. New techniques emerged, more sophisticated, more dangerous, more expensive. The cat-and-mouse game continued with different players, but the fundamental desperation driving it remained unchanged. Roberto, the contact driver, was never caught. He'd played his role too well, just another helpful stranger who couldn't fix a breakdown. He visited Ernesto once in prison, maintaining cover as concerned acquaintance. The message was clear. The network survived, would welcome them back if they wanted, though trust would need rebuilding. Ernesto declined. Some performances, once broken, couldn't be resumed. The breakdown spot on Interstate 8 became known among agents, a training location where newcomers learned to spot stage incidents. Tom received a commendation for his observation, though he'd simply been trying to help stranded motorists. His trained eye had seen what it was conditioned to see, turning humanitarian impulse into law enforcement success. In federal prison, Ernesto met others who'd been caught in various schemes. Tunnel builders, boat operators, document forgers, all sharing stories of perfect plans undone by small failures. But his situation felt different. They'd been caught by investigation, surveillance, informants. He'd been undone by kindness, by someone stopping to help who saw too clearly. He taught English to fellow inmates, using his education to help others prepare for life after release. Many were migrants who'd be deported, needing language skills for another attempt or for survival in American detention. He never discouraged their dreams, understanding the forces that drove people to risk everything. But he shared his story as warning. Even Oscar-worthy performances could fail if the wrong person was watching. Letters from the 3 trunk passengers found him occasionally. Maria wrote from El Salvador, describing conditions that made him understand why she'd try again despite deportation. Carlos's family sent word that he'd made it on his 4th attempt, was washing dishes in Nevada, sending money home. Anna wrote the most painful letters, photos of a daughter she saw once a year, growing up American while she remained eternally foreign. The brothers were released years apart, reuniting in a world that had changed while they were inside. Their mother was gone, the family home sold for medical debts. The network still operated, but with new players, new methods. They found legitimate work in construction, using backs instead of trunks to carry loads. But the skills remained, reading people, timing operations, performing under pressure. Sometimes Ernesto drove past the old breakdown spot. Now just another piece of highway. No evidence remained of their theater, the performances that had moved human cargo through a crack in border security. He wondered how many other spots held similar invisible history, how many desperate dramas played out on ordinary roadsides. He thought about Tom often, the off-duty agent whose trained observation had changed everything. No malice in the man, just professional skill applied reflexively. In a different world, they might have been friends, sharing beer and car knowledge. Instead, they'd been performer and critic in a show where detection meant destruction. The trunk modification that had hidden people so successfully was evidence in court, the craftsmanship admired even by prosecutors. German engineering repurposed for human smuggling, precision used for desperate purposes. After the trial, the Honda was presumably destroyed or auctioned. Its secret compartment just another modification in a world full of hidden spaces. New smugglers learn from the Pena brothers' mistake. Don't run the same route repeatedly. Vary the breakdown locations. Use different vehicles. Have counter surveillance for helpful strangers. But the fundamental vulnerability remained. Any performance could be penetrated by the right observer at the wrong moment. Ernesto kept one photo from that time. The 3 trunk passengers sitting on the highway barrier, waiting for processing. Maria clutching her cross. Carlos staring at freedom just out of reach. Anna protecting her unborn child. He'd risked his freedom to give them theirs. Failed because someone saw too clearly. The image reminded him that even failed rescues had human faces. Stories that continue beyond capture. Years later, working honestly in construction, he'd sometimes see Border Patrol vehicles and wonder if Tom was inside. The agent had been doing his job, protecting borders he'd sworn to defend. Ernesto had been doing what he saw as humanitarian work, moving people toward hope. Both had performed their roles perfectly. The tragedy was that those roles were opposing forces in a drama neither had written. The fake breakdown technique was added to training manuals, one more method in an encyclopedia of human ingenuity applied to border crossing. Agents learned to look for the signs. Too convenient locations, excessive nervousness disguised as mechanical frustration, vehicles riding low from hidden weight. Tom's observation became institutional knowledge. His moment of recognition multiplied across thousands of trained eyes. But for every method detected, new ones emerged. Human desperation was endlessly creative, finding cracks in any system. The Pena brothers had exploited the assumption that breakdowns were random, that helpful strangers were just that. Their exposure closed one door but revealed how many others might exist, invisible until the right eyes saw through their camouflage. In quiet moments, Ernesto wondered about parallel lives. If Tom hadn't driven by, if the helicopter had been elsewhere, if Roberto had arrived minutes earlier, 3 people would have reached Los Angeles, started new lives, sent money home. 2 brothers would have continued their performance, paying for cancer treatment through highway theater. Instead, everyone's life had fractured along the fault line of that failed breakdown. He never returned to smuggling, but the border never left him. It lived in his caution around authority, his awareness of observation, his understanding that performance could be penetrated by trained eyes. He'd learned that helping people cross borders was itself a border crossing, from legal to illegal, from citizen to criminal, from freedom to cage. The Interstate 8 breakdown had been perfect except for its audience. Tom's appearance was random chance that felt like destiny, a civilian uniform hiding professional observation. The performance had been exposed not by investigation but by intersection. Two lives crossing at exactly the wrong moment for one, the right moment for law. Now, years later, building homes instead of hiding people, Ernesto understood that borders existed everywhere. Between legal and illegal, helper and criminal, performance and reality. He'd cross them all in a Honda Civic with a false trunk and a fake breakdown, discovered by an off-duty agent who'd simply stopped to help. The irony was perfect. Humanitarian gestures colliding, one revealing the other, both trying to do right in a world where right had different definitions depending on which side of the border you stood. The hazard lights had blinked their warning, but the real hazard had been invisible until too late. A trained eye, a helpful stranger, a performance too perfect to be real. 3 people had paid with their dreams, 2 brothers with their freedom, all because someone saw what was hidden in plain sight on a California highway where breakdowns were supposed to be random and helpful strangers were supposed to be just that. But Tom had been both more and less than he appeared, and in that gap between appearance and reality, lives had changed forever.